If you think photographing wild grizzly bears, moose, bald eagles, majestic mountain landscapes, marine wildlife
3 hours later
is pretty neat and you want to fill an SD card full of those subjects, you should come with us to Alaska. We're going again in July as part of our 2025 TPM annual photography retreat.
It's going to be legendary.
We went to Alaska last year in 2024 and it was epic. We have 2 spots left for this year and we'd love for one of them to be you. You can check the link out in our episode description to see the sample itinerary for this year, pricing, and to see last year's video to get a taste of what you're in for. Hope to see you there. Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Photographer Mindset Podcast. I'm your co-host, Seth Macy.
I'm your co-host, Aaron Manis.
Well, let me ask you this. What excites you most about AI in transforming photo and video creations, especially in ways that people might not have noticed yet or might be misunderstanding?
Yeah, I think the really exciting thing about AI is in 3 to 5 years, we will basically be able to tell any story or any concept that we have in our minds at a really high production value without having to go through all the cost to realize that production value. So in effect, I think the value of high fidelity and fancy cameras and equipment and hiring actors and everything will go down, whereas your ability to tell a story or to have an interesting concept and to share it or to share some genuine part of your own life, that becomes way more important. So I think we can talk more about the mechanisms for this, but in the next 3 to 5 years, the value of storytelling goes up, and relative to the value of just being able to like compose a technically perfect shot or have a high resolution image.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I think also there's this idea that if AI makes it easier to craft excellent work and there's less input, that eventually all content is so excellent that it ends up being paradoxically average. Kind of like if everything is great, then nothing is. It would be another way to phrase it. Do you see AI leveling the playing field or widening the gap between who is creating quality work and who is not? I know those are 2 different subjects and what we started on. You mentioned just ease of access in your first point, but I'm more curious to hear your thoughts on a leveling or widening of the gap between what is great work and what's not as we progress.
Yeah, so I think right now there's a couple things that set content apart, right? So first is the actual storytelling. And you can tell a story with high production value or low production value. But currently, I think really high production value is still rare enough and high friction and high barrier enough, expensive enough to make it special when you see it. So you can kind of get away maybe with producing a average story at a really high production value and it can still seem pretty good. I think in the future, the way that'll change is an average story will just be an average story, regardless of the production value, because anybody can achieve high production value. So it will democratize things in the sense that production value and the quality, the visual quality of the output will become commoditized. But relatively speaking, the value of the story and the human connection goes up. I think there's an interesting analogy here, actually. So I played chess on the side. Don't play much anymore, actually. It takes so much time. And I get mad when I lose. But so obviously computers are way better at chess than humans are. And back when, Deep Blue beat Kasparov in the 90s or whatever it was this big thing. Like, okay, first of all, are humans going extinct? Second of all, is chess going to die, right? Because humans are no longer the best at chess. But nowadays, chess is bigger than ever. I think more people in the world right now play and enjoy chess than ever before. And if you look at the games that are played from 2 computers, right? Technically speaking, they're amazing. They're these works of art, genius, and they sacrifice a major piece and end up winning in the end, and it's like amazing. You can't even understand it. But I think that's a problem. That's why people still want to see human grandmasters play each other and listen to the stories between them that actually makes it interesting and adds context. Like there was a cheating scandal where Magnus Carlsen, the best player in the world, thought that somebody cheated using a vibrating device in the grant or something.
I remember that. And didn't he refuse to play?
Exactly.
There's something strong in the chess world. It's incredible.
Yeah, it all adds color to the stories that are actually told through the medium. And I think a similar thing will happen with content creation, where maybe the technical excellence of when you see the photo, it's perfectly lit or it has really high resolution, that will no longer be a differentiating factor. But the stories will remain and actually be elevated even more so.
Right. It's like if everyone can make a hit song, it's the story behind it's the songwriting would be another analogy.
Exactly. Yeah. It's what the message that you're trying to tell.
Or the instrumentation's not going to hold you back, right? Like I have this narrative, I have this original idea, but I cannot really play piano. But if I can program something to create this amazing background piece and then tell my story, then I've got something.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Whereas before, maybe you needed to hire a band or something to help you.
Right. And that has its own limitations too. Like that's not exactly what I was thinking, or I can't really tweak it, or I got to pay you way more to try it again, like that sort of thing. So I can see that there. I also see it like following this trend through all of technology where, I don't know how many years ago, but it was all film photography. And that bumped out a lot of people because it's like, let alone bringing it to the store to get it developed. Before that, even like you need a dark room and you need to understand the process and dodging and burning and how to edit. Then you're able to have CVS do your photos and get those disposable cameras. Now it's accessible to a lot more people. Then there's digital. Then there's Lightroom and Photoshop where you can add a whole bunch of texture and things to it. And now the qualities in cameras have increased. There's AI, there's helpful things where if it's not sharp, you can actually sharpen it. You can print at a huge size if you want, where you had to zoom in before and now you couldn't. So there's all this technology that's just continually getting better and making it more accessible and easy for people to tell their stories.
Yeah, 100% agreed. I also think that one other effect of the increasing or the rising tide of production value, I guess you can say, is authentic content that paradoxically is lower fidelity and maybe lower production value also becomes more desirable or interesting. If you have 1,000 times more highly produced perfect content than you have right now, all of a sudden somebody with a great story to tell who can tell it in a really authentic way that maybe is just talking to the camera or taking wedding photos, for example, that are really authentic rather than super magically produced, all of a sudden has a lot more value than maybe it does right now.
So you mentioned what the landscape, in your opinion, looks like in 3 to 5 years. It's funny because I have written down, what do we look like in 2035 in the photography and videography landscape? Is that too far out? I'm giving you permission to be entirely wrong on a prediction or guess or...
I usually don't need permission for that, so that happens all the time. Yeah, 2035. So I think there's a couple of things that I know almost for a fact that will happen. By 2035, I think anything you imagine in your mind with anybody in it, with any style, whether it be photorealistic or like a cartoon or anything, you will be able to describe using words and other inputs into a system that will get you a perfectly photorealistic result in the output for video, image, and possibly whatever the next form factor is, like 3D or VR or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
So in a world like that, I think it has several pretty interesting ramifications for society that we can talk about. But I think that'll probably be the biggest change from now, I would say.
Yeah, let's say more. Let's talk about those impacts.
Yeah, so I think one thing is Well, one thing that we talked about already is the value of the story will become a lot more important when anybody anywhere can tell a story, and it will all look amazing, right?
Right.
And there's basically zero friction to creating a story in a really nice way. But the second kind of counterintuitive thing that will be different is this might be a hot take. Like, I don't know if this might be wrong, but I feel like it will be true. Is in 10 years from now, the value of real photos and real videos, like as a recording of reality, will actually be 10 times higher than it is right now. Because there's going to be so much content that is generated that looks great, but isn't actually a true reflection of reality. It's like a concept, basically. And I think humanity, people, and society will understand that the AI generated content is more a conceptual thing than a true reflection of reality. And there's going to be so much more of that than actual photographic and videographic recording content.
Do you think in 10 years we'll be able to tell the difference?
That's an interesting question. So right now, even for an image, okay, maybe some people will be able to tell the difference. I can't tell the difference between a really well photoshopped image and one that's not, right? One that's actually a reflection of reality. But yet, as a society, we've sort of developed mental ways to deal with this. Like, we don't automatically trust every image, but we kind of use the context to see whether this is a trustworthy image or not. And people can try to deceive us or fake it, but I don't think it's a major issue right now where photographic evidence is like a major societal issue that we can't deal with. So I think something similar will happen with AI generated content in the future, where if it's not an accurate representation of reality, as a society, we will find ways to be able to differentiate that and recordings of reality.
Yeah. I'm going to preface this by saying this is anecdote, but I do see a lot in online communities, people who successfully identify an AI generated image that isn't stated as so. And they'll write things like, this is AI garbage, or so sick of seeing these AI images, this isn't real, etc. Do you feel like this emotional response comes from the feeling of someone feeling like they've been duped? Or do you sense there's more of a larger counter movement to art or images that could be created by humans, but that aren't?
That's an interesting question. I guess the thing that comes to mind is, so everybody says that they don't like being sold to, right? Like, people generally don't have a greatest first impression of, for example, salespeople, right? It's like, oh, I don't like being sold to. But what people generally don't like is being sold to badly. You know, they don't like salespeople that are too pushy and too insistent and all these negative traits that you associate with them. But when you get sold to in a way that aligns with your interests and they're offering a solution that you actually need and want, it doesn't feel like you're being sold to. But people don't consider that sales. So I think in a similar way, I think a lot of the backlash right now to AI is the tools being used in kind of maybe tacky ways or ways that threaten to replace, say, your 20 years of photography experience with something that looks objectively terrible. And you just have the immediate emotional response to that, saying, that's never going to replace me. And I hate anybody that says it will. But I think in the long run, AI will actually help people's workflow by helping them do what they want to do already, rather than just like replacing them in the most flagrant way possible.
Yeah, it's the fact that you interested nobody likes being sold to, or that people want to be sold things that help them, that solve their problems. So at Topaz, what problem did you initially set out to solve, and how has that changed with the landscape of AI rapidly accelerating and evolving on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so it's actually a kind of an interesting story. So it turns out it's really hard to build something that people actually want. It's both more important, I would say, and more difficult than I guessed before. The first project that we ever did was it was called Topaz Moment. You would take a video and take one frame in it and try to upscale that using the surrounding frames as reference. Theoretically, you get more information. You can get a higher resolution still from it. Pretty cool concept. We thought people would like it. And so I started promoting it on forums and things like that. And a couple of people bought it, but it was like wading through molasses, right? It was really, really hard to sell. And I got into a forum, like a flame war with somebody where I was like, hey, there's this cool product. And they were like, this is terrible. This is awful. I don't know why you would have ever built this thing. I would never use it. Why didn't you build this other thing instead? It's like this HDR effects generator thing. I would totally buy that, but I bet you can't do it. And so I was working with my dad, Albert, at the time, and we saw this comment and we're like, you know what, we can totally do that. Let's just prove this guy wrong. So we shipped it in 3 weeks. It was called Topaz Adjust. And it was the first product that brought us to over $1 million in revenue. We released it. It was like $30K the first month, $100K the second month. It was absolutely insane. And it was a lot easier to do than the first product that we made. So I think that was kind of the first lesson in just building something that people actually want. And in 2018, when we first experimented with GAN models for upscaling, a similar feel happened as well, where the quality of the results were just so good that they were blowing customers away, even though the product was kind of crashing all over the place at the time, that we just refocused the whole company to work on that. By the way, this is a little bit of a tangent, but I kind of feel like currently the applications of AI that are on top of everybody's minds right now in the world, like text to image generation, text to video, they're a little bit like that first use case where, yeah, it has a good amount of value, but I don't think it has unlocked all the value of the technology yet. It's kind of like that first Topaz Moment product. And I think the world has yet to sort of fully realize the use cases that the technology can fulfill past just like the immediately obvious one.
Yeah, speaking of things the world is yet to realize, what are some harsh truths you feel people need to hear about how the world has changed permanently? It's becoming clearer and clearer that the continued integration of AI in diverse industries is no longer hypothetical.
Yeah. So I guess
Let me rephrase, not harsh truths, just truths.
Yeah. I think the most salient one, right, is people are always concerned that AI will take jobs, right? And I guess to examine this, we should just look at, for example, some of the use cases of photography. So I think for most forms of photography, they have a basis in telling a human story that actually happened. For those forms of photography, like wedding photography, portrait photography, things like this, that have a root in the real world, I think actually AI will be beneficial for these. Because, like I mentioned before, the value of recording reality and presenting something as it actually is, I think will go up relatively to where it is right now. But for the kinds of photography that are purely about creating a pretty image, that have no real root in reality, for example, say stock photography, the value of those photos just come from the aesthetic, like composition and like sort of a generic subject being depicted, right? I think for that kind of photography, actually AI will completely replace it. So that might be an uncomfortable fact for stock photographers. I guess you could see it that way. Or maybe if you do stock, maybe you want to look more at AI tools. But depending on the use case, I think it will replace certain roles and elevate others.
Yeah, it's constantly shifting, right? Like there's, I was just looking into a company that is AI will take food orders and talk to you completely through the telecom. So you drive up through McDonald's or Wendy's and you're talking to AI and they're getting your order completely. So now maybe you don't need a person that's listening and making mistakes or putting in the thing wrong, whatever it is, but maybe you need more cooks on the line. Maybe you need more servers because now there's quicker and faster orders. So I feel like it's a constant shifting and refocusing. I mean, one step below AI is the change between, I think, the drive of photography versus videography, and how Reels and TikTok has changed that sort of landscape in terms of what companies want from photographers. We actually really would love some videographers, so learning that craft and learning that new skill is a shift, and you can either jump down the river with everyone else or kind of fight it, but then you might miss out. Just some thoughts there.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Speaking on that, what are some industry trends you're watching closely, or what are some ways you think that the framework of AI is going to be used in a more unique and more innovative way?
I think a major trend has been to find in the industry has been to find different verticals that are most applicable to the technology. For example, one interesting business use case that a lot of startups are trying to tackle right now is AI headshots. So AI avatars where they can explain a product feature to people. And essentially, that's rather than trying to generate anything at any time, it's narrowing on a specific business use case and trying to solve that end to end. From what I've seen, I think a lot of the activity has revolved around that sort of thing.
Mhm.
I also think that, so another possibly tangential analogy, we use a software called Help Scout for customer support here at Topaz. Basically, you send us an email that goes into a ticket in Help Scout, and we respond to it through the ticketing system. You might expect their adoption of AI to be, hey, we have a fully automated customer support chatbot, right? Like, here it is. You'll never have to answer a ticket again. I think that would be a terrible idea. And they didn't actually do it that way. Instead, they introduced AI tools to enhance the support agent's workflow to make them a lot more productive. And I think in a similar way, gradually the industry is shifting more towards that approach of taking existing workflows that people already do and just making them better rather than seeking to replace them outright. Not to toot our own horn, but that's exactly what we're trying to do, which is people already want clearer and higher resolution and sharper output. And instead of trying to, like we generate all of that from scratch and replace the need for a photo, for a camera or videos completely, we just do that thing. And so far, people have seemed to really like that approach.
Yeah,
I certainly have.
Yeah,
saved me many.
No kidding. This may be an odd question, but what does, at least at Topaz, what does artificial intelligence even look like? Is it truly lines and lines of code that builds upon itself? And follow-up question, at what point is there no need for human intervention to improve upon the code or algorithms?
Ooh, yeah. So this is starting to get more into, at least for right now, more into science fiction than reality.
Should I grab my book here? Should I grab my 1984 Orwellian book?
Oh yeah, that book is that's a heavy one for a podcast.
Yeah.
I sit here and I read the whole thing. It's 10 hours long.
Yeah. Right now, I still think it's a little bit. It's definitely pretty far off to ever imagine a reality where an AI model will just train itself. I think they're doing some pretty cool work with agents now at OpenAI and other places, but it's definitely in the early stages. Right now, AI just means the technology of the types of models that we're using, rather than it is self-learning in any way.
Right. Well, you just made a lot of people sleep easier tonight.
Phew.
So, on this topic, we'll get back to maybe some more enlightening things, but we asked you what you were most excited about. What kind of scares you the most, and how do we avoid that, either in the photography industry or in general? If anything.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I'm not sure that there's too much that concerns me. I'm not sure if this is the forum for the discussion, but have you ever heard of P Doom?
No, what's PDoom?
Okay, so I'm not super into this, but it's the idea that there is a certain percentage chance that AI will destroy humanity in some form. And everybody has their own PDoom number, which is the percentage chance that you attribute that to. So this is kind of discussed a lot in like AI safety and circles and things. But I'm not really a huge believer that AI will end up doing that. And aside from any of those concerns, I feel pretty good about where AI is headed. Actually, I really think that it will improve the lives of a lot of people and give us much more capability to tell better stories and connect with each other much better than we can now. I also just think that even just from a purely practical point of view, it would be amazing to have some of this stuff be a part of our daily life. Not even talking about the creative aspect, just having a personal assistant on your phone that has access to all your email and that you can trust implicitly. That would be absolutely amazing. And that's the future that we live in, you know?
How would you use that virtual assistant on a personal level?
Yeah, I would probably talk to it all the time. You know, it's just scheduling certain meetings, or if I have some email that I don't remember when it came in, but it had some info in it, I could ask it to look it up. I could even discuss certain ideas with it. Right now, I use ChatGPT to bounce ideas off of it all the time. And yeah, I just think the future is pretty bright when it comes to becoming fairly superhuman. Having normal people become superhuman by today's standards with the help of AI.
That company I just read an article about made a deal with a motor company, but it's just the interface. So you can, instead of looking up like I want Mexican food on the way home and I have to pull over or search it or Google it, you're driving and you can pretty much say, hey, you see where I am? I'm going home. Is there a Mexican restaurant on the way home? Could you order me in 3 tacos and whatever, some churros to go? And it's like, yep, sure, takes care of it. And then it lets you know like the pickup time. So it's like talking to a buddy in the passenger seat. That's what it seemed like, versus doing all the work and trying to figure it out while you're trying to drive or whatnot. So just the ease of those sorts of moments, I thought it was very cool to be able to just have sort of a conversation with your interface of what you're thinking. And it figures out those things like, oh, where are you now? This is where you're going. Let's try to find something on the way. Let me reroute the directions for you. Doing like all those little steps that right now we could do, but we'd have to really kind of think about and pull over and map it out.
Yeah, Aaron, actually, that's a fantastic point. I think one of the big sort of revolutionary events that happened in tech was when Google and search brought the world's information to everybody's fingertips. As anybody, almost anybody in the world, you now have access to the world's information. That's amazing, right? I think what AI is about to do is, as anybody in the world, you now have access to superhuman capabilities, like the superhuman cognition and the ability to do anything that you could, given direction, but do it better and faster and more efficiently. On the creative side, of course, that includes being able to tell any story that you want to tell with a really high production value. But it extends everywhere. And I think that can make for a pretty interesting and unique world in 10 years from now.
I'm curious 10 years from now if, nowadays we're looking for, maybe in a movie, we need an actor with a certain look, right? So that's a first stop gate. Like they got to look a certain way. They got to be in a certain age frame, whatever it may be to make this character happen. Or we need someone with a certain kind of vocal technique or ability. We need someone that just all these stop gates to figure it out in real life versus the search for, not does anyone look this way or any models that we can use, but the search being, does anyone have a cool story? Right? Like I could see stories that are real and come from real life interaction being kind of bought and used to then create it in any way that you want. Whereas now it's kind of like, let's make a story around these actors or around this scenario, what have you. So like you said, I could see storytelling and narratives and actual events being sought after.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so one time I was working with a product person on our team. He actually had just joined the company, and he wrote something that I thought was really, really good, just really comprehensive. It was also quite concise. It didn't ramble on and on. And I was telling him, man, you did a great job with it. Because historically, the quality of your writing to me is a great indicator of sort of clarity of thought and how much, how deep you go on a certain topic. If you have a really clear piece of writing, it says a lot about the person that just joined your team. And then he turns around and he says, "Oh yeah, that was pretty good. I did it in 10 minutes using ChatGPT." And I was like, "Wow, one of my kind of deeply ingrained rules of thumb or shortcuts when evaluating a person is their writing skill. But now maybe I can't do that anymore. Maybe I have to actually evaluate the quality of the content much more than just the presentation style." And I think it'll be the same thing with content. Right now, a lot of people evaluate content by the production value. I don't think that will be the case pretty soon.
Yeah, it's almost like you have to decipher now. Your evaluation is now based on almost quality of prompt.
Right. Or the quality of the underlying concept.
Yeah. Which is so fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, even I work in a school. That's my full-time job. Eric's, I'm sure you did not know that. It'd be weird if you did. But the time that AI has helped me to save and get a well-composed letter out to a parent or a teacher that has my main points, and I don't have to slave over thinking like, oh, let me check for typos. Let me check for punctuation. Let me check for how this sounds, the tone. It's an amazing starting point at the very least to get my idea across and get a form going and get it out there. I need the information sent and I need to move on to other things versus get really stuck on these kind of trivial moments in my day, which is like just checking grammar and making sure I don't look like a fool, honestly. And it helps me to get my point out, get the message out that I need to, and move on to other things. So even in many different applications, it becomes just allowing me to be and have the human connection that, with the students as a counselor, more time in that realm than composing an email to a parent and making sure it sounds good. So again, just a shift in time, a shift in where energy goes is how I see it.
Yeah. And I would argue too that frees you up to maybe do things that only you can do rather than AI can do.
Yeah.
And add value in ways that you uniquely know how to do. So I think it's a net positive for the world.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's a good point, because I was going to make the argument, do you worry about the level of atrophy, for example, in not writing your own letters? But Eric, you bring up a good point that it may actually be a net positive value because you can focus on more of what you're an expert in.
Yeah, for sure. I actually kind of have a weird attribute when I use Google Maps a lot every day, but I always orient it so that north is facing up on the map instead of, the where you're going is facing up. And to myself, I tell myself it's because, I want to keep my own map reading abilities intact. Just in case I have to read a map again, I want to know how to orient myself. In practice, though, I will probably be useless without Google Maps at finding directions to anywhere. But thinking about it, I think that's okay. I don't, as long as mapping technology is still around, I think my life is still okay without me knowing that.
Yeah, I guess you have to put faith in the reliability of the tech to remain existing.
Right.
Otherwise, we'll all be turning left and bumping into each other and running stoplights. And
what a world with perfectly produced content everywhere.
Exactly. Why do you feel that many photographers in the community are resistant to change, this new world of AI? What do you think the difference is between those who are fully on board and integrating AI versus those who are not and pushing back? Not that one is right or wrong or better or worse.
I think it's a combination of things. One of the biggest objections that we've seen before. So we in 2018, this was before ChatGPT, before all the other AI stuff. We did the first AI image upscaling tool. Back then, nobody actually knew what AI was. In fact, our first products were called like Gigapixel AI, Denoise AI, Sharpen AI, and especially for Sharpen AI, so they would call it Denoise Owl, like it was AL, right? Because nobody knew what the acronym AI was, and they kept calling Sharpen AI Topaz Al Sharpton, and like people just completely didn't have the concept.
That's great.
Right? And so, actually, a big part of our jobs was trying to educate people what AI is and all this stuff. And one of the biggest issues that we would run into is, I think, people would always say, look, you just got to become a better photographer so you can take it right in camera. Like, why would you use an AI tool to fix it if all you have to do is just become a better photographer? So it's the idea that I think because a lot of people have spent a ton of time working on perfecting the technical aspects of the craft that actually might become commoditized using AI, I think that can cause kind of a sort of a very fight or flight kind of response when a newer photographer can come in with 0 years of experience and maybe create something that's similar to the level of quality that you worked for 20 years to be able to produce. I think where that breaks down, obviously, is if you spent 20 years learning how to tell better stories with your images or with your videos, then there's no way that newcomer can compete there.
Right. And then you add the two together and then you're superhuman. Right?
Exactly.
You have the best of both worlds.
Exactly.
For me, a personal story is starting off in wildlife photography. I always felt this a little bit of a stopgate where people are using this $13,000 prime lens and getting this beautiful blur behind, allowing more light to come in so their photos aren't noisy. When you're doing wildlife photography, it's usually at dusk or dawn and the lighting's not great, and your photos can be noisy. Instead of spending $13,000 for a lens, finding your products a couple years back just saved so many photos that I normally would be like, the lighting just wasn't absolutely perfect. Like it's too noisy. It doesn't look great. Being able to apply that to edits and save photos and put them at a level where they're smooth and silky and have a sort of an effect that really went with the way I edited anyways, just was like a huge game changer to keep me going and propel me. I never felt like the $13,000 lens, unless someone gave it to me, is a wise investment. And now definitely not, because of software that can help me out get through some of those issues. So
yeah, that means a lot that it would help so much. Actually, I think these stories are always really, really gratifying whenever we hear that we can get you quality that otherwise it would take a really expensive lens to take.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so speaking on this topic of storytelling and putting a lot of our emphasis there, how do the traditional skills of photographers and videographers remain relevant as we progress forward in this industry that's leaning more on AI?
Well, I'm not sure if I have any special insight as to what specific skills will remain relevant and what doesn't. I think right now, if you divide the amount of time that photographers, especially videographers, spend on technical aspects of the job, like culling photos, developing the raw files, making sure the exposure is right in post-processing, even during the shoot, framing it correctly, and denoising it, sharpening it, picking the right ones, versus actually being the creative director of the shoot what story you want to tell with it, what memories you want to capture. I would welcome y'all's input on this as well, but I would say that most of the time would be spent on technical aspects. Now, I think in the new world that we're talking about in the future, like you would still want to take the photos, so that part wouldn't be saved. But everything else, I think, can be handled for you. And so I guess for whichever creators currently spend more time on the storytelling aspect, they stand to gain more as the tools get better. Because I think the tools will never replace the creative direction. So I guess a way to think that I think about this is before you would have to be the painter and paint every single brushstroke on the canvas. And for a painter that has just spent decades perfecting their ability to paint individual brushstrokes, AI tools are going to be quite a shock to them. But if you're a painter who spends a lot of time learning anatomy and how to tell a story of a human in your work, then I think that part of your skill set will be much more valuable.
Yeah, for sure. I think it also is really dependent on what you love doing. So, for example, I love filming. I love filming wildlife. I like being behind the camera, press and record, composing shots, but I'm not as excited in Premiere or Final Cut editing. Right? Like I would love a software, an AI software that just creatively edits with transitions and in a way that I could prompt and it's finished, because I simply don't like doing that. And then it allows me to go film more, which I like doing.
Yeah.
And capturing those shots creatively with a human aspect.
Yeah, that's a great point. I saw a funny quote or meme somewhere once that was like, I wanted AI to do my laundry and do my dishes so that I could create art, not to do my art so I could spend my time doing dishes and doing laundry. But I think on the creative side, actually, AI is going to be doing the metaphorical dishes and laundry. It's going to be taking care of the post-processing and the technical aspects of it while you can tell your creative story.
Or you could be somebody completely opposite to me, where it's like, I really love editing and building the story through creative cuts and transitions, but I don't want to go out and film the stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all dependent on the individual and where their interests lie, which to me is amazing, the potential.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. At some level, content and creativity is meant to be consumed by other humans. And people are interested in human stories and connection and craft. So as long as somebody is injecting some part of that, either in the production process or the storytelling process, or even the story of how you created that content, I think that has a lot of meaning to people. Speaking of $13,000 lens, there's a reason that a lot of people still shoot Leica, and it's not because it's easier to use or even higher quality in any way, right? It's kind of it enhances the story, even to yourself, of how you actually took the photo and the meaning behind it.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. How do you keep up with the demands of creators at Topaz? We ask a lot.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in focus. So from 2008 till I would say mid last year, we just focused on basically one thing: improving the visual quality of images and videos. People have been asking us for a lot more, and now there's so many new things in AI where we're starting to expand a little bit more from there. So, for example, we're starting to look at improving lighting and color. We're experimenting with a feature to turn regular images into live photos, things like that. So I think the really interesting thing is, before we show somebody and before photographers actually start using it, we almost have no idea how well it will do. So it's a very experimental process to find product market fit. So I guess the name of the game for us right now is we're experimenting with a bunch of stuff and working with photographers in order to refine it and figure out what's actually valuable.
And how are you deciding what's essential? It can be difficult to zero in on what the most pressing or important thing is when there's so many interesting directions you could go. So I'm curious to know how you remain focused and what criteria deems something essential for you and your team.
A moment that we talk a lot about internally is the magic moment or the wow moment. So there's kind of a moment that you use or that you experience when you use something and you see it work in a certain way and you're like, wow, holy crap, that was amazing. That's the moment that we look for in anything that we do. So basically we work with photographers who have a certain need, and then we try to design a solution to that need, and then we show them and say, here it is, and watch them use it. And if their jaw doesn't drop, it's probably not a good feature overall. But if their jaw drops and they're like, okay, how do I buy this right now? That's the kind of thing that we keep moving forward. The really nice thing about this AI push is now there's so many opportunities for this wow moment, especially adapted to improving images rather than replacing them, because nobody else is actually working on this. Everybody's just working on creating things from nothing. So we're actually in a pretty unique position where we get to work on improving photographers' lives with things that they already want to do and dropping their jaws that way rather than, a use case that they might not want to touch right now.
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
That made me think, do you want a multi-million-dollar idea? I got one.
Absolutely.
It's recorded now. It's recorded, right. So I want some sort of a cut. But medical imaging, that has come a long way. However, it's still at a stage of very kind of grainy, undetailed photos. I mean, that seems like a cash cow if you could give expecting mothers a really detailed, upscaled picture of their baby inside of them. That what's that called? Like, I don't know. What's it called when you get your scan and your imaging and they place that? Yeah, an ultrasound. Thank you, Seth. An ultrasound where you can kind of upscale it, or MRIs where you're upscaling it and getting incredible detail in certain ways and helping the medical field. So I don't know if that's an avenue that you've gone down or experimented with, but it just seems like a kind of a cool ability.
Yeah, I think that's a huge future application of AI for sure. Yeah, we haven't really gotten into it just because it's tough to be in two businesses, one the creative business and then also a business like that. I would say that one, it would be immensely valuable, but the current way the technology works as far as diffusion models and GAN models, it's not really a perfect fit when accuracy is the objective.
Right.
When you want something to look good, right now, the research is fantastic at making that happen. It's progressing really quickly too. When you want something that is true to reality, it might even be theoretically impossible to do that. So we have had actually.
I tried.
Yeah, it is a good idea. If I think if a company were to really focus on that, it would it could possibly work pretty well. And actually, we've seen that certain, for example, tumor detection algorithms actually do work better when you reduce noise using some of these models. But it is a pretty difficult technical challenge to solve as well.
Interesting.
Well, Aaron's going to take his idea and he's going to make Topaz Labs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I look forward to Sapphire Labs.
Yeah.
Here's an interesting question for you. Do you feel technological progress follows a pattern of diminishing returns? For instance, early innovations like the invention of the wheel required minimal resources, yet had a massive impact on human advancement. In contrast, modern breakthroughs like developing a cancer treatment, let's say, demand billions of dollars and a combined efforts of the brightest minds to move the needle an inch, incremental progress. Do you feel like AI has the potential to reverse this trend and create a more linear or accelerated rate of progress? Or does it, in your opinion, primarily serve to handle the more labor intensive aspects of innovation?
Yeah, when it comes to using AI to push forward the boundaries of science, I am a little bit outside of my wheelhouse here. I don't
That's okay.
know.
Okay.
I would hope
we just
accelerate.
develop stuff for creators and photographers.
I just make things look good, man. But but I would hope it does. You know, I think um, everything is moving forward. Human progress in general is moving forward a lot quicker, in part because of all the efficiencies that we gain from technology. And I personally think that AI will be a massive accelerant there. But nothing I work on a day-to-day basis has any relevance to that. So.
Right. Well, we just like to try and get very existential. Yeah. Do you feel like technological progress is a law of diminishing returns, or do you feel like it's more of a constant?
I feel like technological innovation is progressing faster. I think it's accelerating.
Really?
And completely different topic, but I think the free market and the sort of free exchange of ideas and the competition between them is a big factor in that in the last 200 years.
Right.
That completely went off the rails. That's a completely different topic.
We don't like to always stay in the photography box. We return to it, but we leave it. We keep it within sight. We say, we see you, we'll come back.
Yeah. We can't talk about that 250 times in a row. You got to get out there. You got to get off the rails.
It's true. Besides improving, I feel like, our storytelling, what do you think are what's some advice for creators on how to better integrate AI software into their workflow, maybe with or without your products?
Mm-hmm. One concept, I guess, that might be interesting to think about is usually new tools at the beginning, before they become actually useful to you, they start off looking like toys. They start off looking like things that would never see the light of day. At the beginning, Google search was terrible, right? And at the beginning, the first iPhone, you couldn't even copy and paste, and no serious business user would use it, right? So, but instead of completely dismissing it off the bat, I would maybe encourage people to experiment with them and see what resonates with them. And maybe it's not ready for prime time now, but maybe you keep trying it and see what the good parts are. And in that way, I think you can have a sense of where things are going better than somebody who all of a sudden wakes up one day and everybody else is using AI and they're not. So I guess I would just encourage people to be experimental, keep an open mind, and try things out.
Yeah. Do you have any awesome stories of people using your software and products to do really amazing things? We have a friend who's been on the show quite a bit, Ian Jones, who he gave a gift to his mom. He refurbished all of her old yearbook photos and gave it to her as a gift, and she was floored. I just think that's such a heartwarming story. I'm curious if you have any more, maybe not necessarily heartwarming stories, but just unique and innovative ways that you've seen people use some of the products and the technology.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think some of the most heartwarming stories are the ones where there is some photo or video that is that is priceless because it will never happen again. So somebody that passed away, or a moment in time that will never happen again, like a day of a wedding, and maybe the photo was damaged or it was just way too old, and somebody tried our software, restored it, and basically had a very intense kind of emotional reaction that they shared with us, and that made us also feel the same way. I think that happens pretty frequently, and in fact, we have a live feed in our Slack chat of all the reviews that come in, and whenever those come in, I think a lot of us kind of get together and read it, and it means a lot. Some of the other cool use cases are our products were taken up to the ISS at one point to try to enhance the space photos up there. They
Wow.
wanted a version that didn't phone home because the ISS couldn't phone home for authentication. So we did that for them.
Well, that's really
And
cool.
yeah, there's a lot of kind of disparate use cases for it that are pretty cool.
That is really cool. I bet when you mentioned the Slack channel, I bet when those messages come through, that's got to really keep a really tight knit bond with the team, and it's got to be a constant reminder of why you're there doing what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's all just about enabling people to do things better and to enable human storytelling and connection. It sounds very abstract from, our mission of upgrading the value of content, right? But
Yeah.
I really think that's where most of the value in the world comes from, especially when it comes to creative realm. So whenever we get a very evocative and specific instance of that, it always serves as a great reminder.
Yeah, for sure. I did see you had an issue with your mobile launch, and my question is not to dig into what happened, but how do you personally deal with mistakes? Because they're bound to happen to everybody, professionals, businesses, the most skilled people, even sometimes when errors that might not even be your fault. It was really nice that Instagram post you had where your team kind of owned it. But I'm curious to know how you personally deal with mistakes when you're in charge of a large company and how you respond.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think fundamentally, if these things don't happen, then I don't think we're moving fast enough, right? Now that is just like, even though we were moving this fast, I still wish that it didn't happen. But in the grand scheme of things, these things will happen. So it really is just moving forward, moving quickly, and being okay with sometimes in the short term withstanding some pain. This iOS app launch was very painful, actually, specifically. So, but I, for me personally, I know that we have a fantastic team, and even without me, saying, "Oh, this is terrible," things like that, like we're doing, we're being very proactive in terms of resolving it. And I think each crisis like this brings the team a little bit closer, and also teaches us a lot about the future as well. For what it's worth, this has happened quite a few times in our past. Not super frequently, but enough to where we're always reminded that we need to work hard in the future to mitigate these. I remember there was this one, not to go into a big list of things, but I remember one time we started adding the option to pay for upgrades for Topaz. Looking back, we probably could have handled it a little bit better, but there was a huge uproar about that. Before, we always gave free updates for life, and I announced a change where we would charge for upgrades. So you still own the software, we charge you for upgrades. This is like 4 or 5 years ago or something. I think going back and doing it again, I might have done some things differently. But basically, there was this huge uproar, and we got a lot of pushback on it, and we're still kind of dealing with some of it today. But we learned a lot from that episode, and I anticipate there will still be some in the future. But
Inevitably so. I mean, I ask these questions because it's the photographer mindset. So we dive into how to deal with mistakes and failure and how to push forward and things that are all in that arena. And you're in a position that is there's a lot of pressure. I'm sure it demands a lot of you. And another question would be, how are you able, and this is for listeners that maybe struggle with this, able to be decisive? You said you made a decision about pricing upgrades, just we use that example, that you maybe look back on and wish you'd done it differently, but you had to be decisive in that moment. Maybe when you don't have all the pieces of information in front of you, how can people get better? What are you better at, being more decisive? What do you do? How are you able to concretely make decisions without dithering and stalling?
Yeah. One thing I think about a lot, actually, I think this is my only job at the company, is really clearly identify and communicate to everybody what the number one most important thing is. at the company for us to achieve in the next quarter or year or whatever. Like if we did nothing else, just doing that one thing would get us to where we need to go.
Mm-hmm.
And then all decisions that lead up to that are basically made for you already. You don't really have to make those decisions, right? Everything already aligns with that one goal. For example, in the case of charging for upgrade, what we were seeing is that the cost for acquiring users was going up and up because every single year, in order to maintain our growth, we had to resell the product to new users. And it is 10 times as hard to sell to new users as existing users. At the same time, existing users also had a lot of demand for new features and things that wouldn't actually acquire new users. And we wanted to solve those things, but we didn't have, as a business, any monetary incentive to do so.
Right.
So then for us, the most important thing was like, okay, how do we align our incentives to improve the product a lot more for existing users rather than just trying to like run sales and get new users all day? And so after we identified that, it wasn't really a decision. Like we just kind of had to figure out how to do it and then just execute on it.
Yeah, that's incredible insight that your job there is to deem what is most important and then I guess decentralize the command and allow people to do what they do best.
Yes, of course. I don't think it's not really just, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about, what's the most important thing? Just like a lot of talking to people and everybody has ideas.
8 hours is just
just 8 hours just thinking.
Pen and paper.
Just writing it on the chalkboard over and over for a whole quarter.
Yeah, it's a lot of other than creation.
Yeah. The point is important though, right? Big macro decisions, the sum of small things leads to great things, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Aaron, do you have any more questions?
I mean, just some personal experience. What I've always loved about your company and the products that I use, and I don't feel like I overuse them, but I have them. It's been a great security blanket knowing certain things can happen and be saved or fixed or adjusted with some of the things going on. So there's just these moments, especially wildlife, where it's like a moment in time that happens and you want to capture this event, this thing. And if something's slightly out of focus or it's a little dark or it was noisy, knowing that, going up on Lightroom and bringing it into your computer and seeing it from the card and the camera, sometimes you can have this moment of like, oh no, like I missed it or I didn't get that shot. It's not as sharp, as tactful as I thought it was going to be versus looking at the back of the camera, but knowing, okay, there's a tool that can help me get to that final place without feeling like I'm completely cheating, without feeling like I'm making it up from thin air, with feeling like, okay, this is a tool, just as Lightroom's a tool where I can sharpen or change the clarity or change the exposure and fix things in little adjustments. These are very specific little adjustments that you offer that have saved countless photos. And, with, like you said, with skill and hopefully you get the shot right. And hopefully best case scenario, you don't have to use it as much, but when you do, it's like, whew, what a lifesaver. And not to mention some of the video stuff, which I've gotten into, having the ability to shoot in a certain frame rate and know that, hey, if I need to slow something down, I can without it looking choppy, but I don't have to fill up my SD card always filming in 120 frames per second when I'm not going to use it most of the time. So just having these tools allows you to really accomplish some nice stuff when you normally would have been handcuffed. So just a personal thank you from my own personal use. Not being sponsored to say that, but that's just a true statement. I've used it well before we even knew who Eric was.
Yeah, thank you so much. That does mean a lot. And I do also love that both the examples that you brought up there, they're use cases that a photographer and videographer would have a intimate sort of knowledge and need for. But if you're just an AI person trying to do AI, you probably don't immediately solve those problems. You probably don't even know about them, right? So I think, like, especially for use cases like that, they're very close to what we want to accomplish in the world. And so that does mean a lot.
Good.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I can't tell you the amount of times I've taken a questionable photo and the moment has passed and I'm opening up, I'm in Lightroom like, please be saved. Please be saved. Please save my photo. Make it usable.
Yeah.
And then you breathe a sigh of relief when it does just that.
Mm-hmm.
So Eric, it's been a pleasure talking with you, man. Thanks for taking the time today to answer our questions and provide your insight. And thanks for the great work you and the team do at Topaz. Like Aaron said, we've used the products long before we even knew who you were. And we're excited to see what you continue to come out with, as I'm sure some of our listeners are. Is there anything that they should, that you can hint at or people should be on the lookout for?
No, I mean, there's a couple of new releases that we have coming out and a couple of new functionality, but we like to think that the results kind of will speak for themselves as they get released. So I'm pretty excited about the future, both of the company and of AI, and also Seth and Aaron. Really do appreciate you taking the time to talk. It was a good time. I really enjoyed it, and hopefully we'll talk more in the future.
One last question for you. What's your favorite Topaz product that you like to use?
Ooh, my favorite Topaz product is Gigapixel AI.
Ah, nice.
Actually, not just because of the technical capabilities, but because it's the story of it being the one that put us on the map, and we still have it today. So I think actually Photo AI might be a little bit more powerful. It is, and it can do more. But Gigapixel always holds a special place in my heart.
Me too. My one last story. I'm sorry, I'm gushing here, but one of my favorite photo that I have ever gotten is a fox mom with a fox kit. It's on my page. However, it was far away, and it was a first time camera that I was using. I really had to zoom in to it, and it was only, I think, like a 2 megabyte picture. Like, not a very detailed photo, not a lot of data in that photo. And this was early on photo, so I was ready to print it out on this huge print, and it's like, nope, too small. And I think that's actually how I found your company, was this moment of like, I want to print this out, and it was like, nope, too small. So trying to resize it didn't look good. Found your company, downloaded Gigapixel, made it huge, it sharpened it, it made it clear. And I have this huge metal print in my living room that I could have easily been stuck or felt like this just didn't work. Like, that sucks that I missed the photo or I was too far away or whatever it is. But that definitely is a moment that like made things happen. So again, thank you.
He posts it like 4 times a year too, because it performs so well on socials. So
yeah,
awesome. Glad it's still adding value for you.
Well, I need that. I'm going to need that program that turns that photo into video, live action video, because now photos don't do as well. So
I'll send you something over email. You can check it out.
Awesome.
Eric, till next time. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks again.